My first real recording. All right. Welcome to the Ladies Leadership Coalition podcast. I'm Charlie Saffro, the host of today's show. It's an honor to introduce listeners to inspiring women who are making a real difference in the logistics and supply chain industry. With our podcast, you'll hear inspirational stories, personal and professional guests tell their stories and challenges they've overcome. We'll talk about how their backgrounds have shaped who they are today and how they empower other women, give back to their communities, and often the world. I'm super excited about today's guest, Elise Lee. Elise is the VP of Customer Experience at Parade, which consists of all post-sales operations, including business and technical onboarding, support, and customer service. Before she joined Parade, Elise was the head of customer experience at ClearMetal, and she ran a 50-person customer success team as the VP of customer success at Project 44. Elise has spent the last 10 years working exclusively in startups, building supply chain freight tech. 3 of them have had successful exits. Elise graduated Summa Cum Laude from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in international and global studies. So I think you can understand why I'm so excited to chat with Elise today. Let's dive in. Elise, it is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. And I do have to make one edit to that wonderful intro you just gave. It's actually 4 successful ones now. One of the companies, that I worked for about 10 years ago just got acquired.
Well, there you go.
It's always a great email to get.
And that's actually a great question to start with. How does it feel to get that after you've already exited? Like, do you feel like your work really contributed to where they are today?
Yeah, absolutely. When you get that email, it's a surprise. You know that you've invested in the company, right? You know that you've joined. You know you were, at least for me, I look for small companies, always trying to be one of the first employees setting up the foundation. I always call myself like, look, I'm not really a fixer. I'm not good at that. If I build it and it gets messed up, I know how to fix it. Someone else built it. I'm not that. That's not really my skill set.
That actually makes a lot of sense. That resonates.
Yeah, right. So it's when you get that, you don't think about it once you leave the company. You do, keep in touch with, at least I do keep in touch with founders and old coworkers, and it is always surprising.
Yeah.
And it feels good, right? And then there's a part of it. This was literally, I worked at this company 10 years ago. So I hadn't even thought about it for a long time. And seeing them grow and seeing them successful just through LinkedIn, when you're not in it, you don't see the day-to-day.
Right.
But when you're actually in and being a part of the acquisition process or IPO or whatever, it's very different. So it's a different feeling. It's rewarding in its own way because you, in a way, didn't have to do all that work. It's so much work going through the whole merger M&A process. So feels good. It's always a little surprise. It's a nice little surprise.
Yeah, it's like reconnecting with an old friend and that you were part of the journey to get them to today. So that's awesome. Well, I want to dive into all of that. Elise, we've crossed paths a bunch of times in our careers, but I've always only known you really in the position that you're in presently and the company you're with. So I want to talk a little bit about your background. Already what you've said, I can tell, is inspiring others to, figure out, how do I get on a path like that? How do I be part of companies that are going through such exciting times? So tell us just a little bit about how you've taken your journey. You've got some marketing in your background, some tech, the customer facing side. How did you get to where you are today?
So I get asked this question a lot, and you would think I'd have some canned response at this point, but I don't. I think the irony of where I'm at today is that I didn't actually focus on wanting it. I didn't say, hey, I really want to be a VP or in the C-suite or on the management team by the time I'm this age or anything like that. I was just really focused on what I didn't want to do, and
Which is
that's
really important.
yeah, it was really important, and you don't know what you want to do unless you know what you definitely don't want to do,
It's so
right?
true, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
how to
the so
find
in
it.
fact, actually, I started my career doing the thing I thought I wanted to do, which was be a fitness instructor.
Oh,
And
wow, okay.
yeah, I started out as a yoga teacher, and a cycle instructor maybe 12 years ago when I graduated. And I thought I wanted that because I had a passion for it. I loved it.
Mhm,
And I very quickly realized when I started doing it, um, I'm not making enough money to travel. I have to work when everyone else is not working. I work at night. I work really early in the morning. I work on weekends. I work on holidays.
sure.
And so I then was really intentional about what I didn't want. Right. I was like, I actually, now I know I don't want to be working on weekends. I don't want to be working at night. I do want to have the flexibility to do things for my life. Right?
Mhm.
I actually have a tattoo that just reminds me every day that it sounds really cliche, but you have one life. You
You
have
live
one.
to live. I love
And
that.
so what's going to allow me to do the things that I want to do? So I
Mhm.
was really intentional about, at that point, looking for kind of companies that had uh, a huge likelihood of success. And this was when startups were a big thing and tech was just starting to really explode in the valley. And everybody wanted to go work at Google and Microsoft. The
Mhm.
perks, right? Salary didn't matter. It was like, go and work somewhere that has a ping pong table, you know?
Exactly.
So I said, look, let me think about kind of an industry that's really stable, and I know I want to get in really early, um, and that's that's how I started. So I was like,
Wow.
supply chain is always going to be there, and I didn't think about supply chain as supply chain, right?
Sure.
This is an industry that is just it's the backbone of everything. There
Mhm.
will always be something there. And then coming from an immigrant family, stability was really important for me
Sure.
too. So wanted to look at that. And from there, just every job I went to next, again, it was just a learning of what I didn't want to do.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it's customer facing. I was like, okay, for some companies I was at, I was spending a lot of time doing data analysis. I'm like,
Not
I don't like doing data analysis. Let me go to another company where the role doesn't require me to do that,
sure.
right? Um, and that's how I ended up here.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
really I've been reflecting a lot about kind of like the seasons of your personal life and how that parallels the seasons of your professional life. And kind
Yes.
of the same thing. Like in the beginning of my career, I was so proud that I was an executor. Like, give me any project, I will make it happen. It will be meticulous, it will be on time. And now I think back and I'm like, that was me because now I am more of that visionary, and the thought of even like executing something to perfection does not fall in my space anymore. And so I think it's part of it is the maturity, part of it is, as you build your career, you're exposed to more, you learn what you like and what you don't like. But
Mhm.
in the beginning stages, when you're young, like, you're just there to soak it in and absorb, and it's really amazing. And I'm very impressed with how you've been able to define that and stick to it, because I think a lot of people, like, they don't really know what they want to do, but they're also not seeking it out. They're just
Yeah.
letting things be the way they are. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
I
Now,
love what you said about season as what did you say? Your
with
season?
seasons, yeah, like, I mean, in my story, I was an independent contributor at my own company for many years, and
Yeah.
as I moved into leadership, I think back and I'm like, should I have done it sooner? But I
Mhm.
don't think I could have done it sooner. I had young kids at the time. I was still figuring out my own industry and the rules of the road, and like, the leadership opportunity came to me at a point in my personal life when I had the capacity. Like I had the capacity to be creative. I had the fire in my belly at the right time. So you really have to think of like where you are personally and how that aligns professionally with where you are and where you want to go.
Yeah. Tuning in. I love that. I love
Exactly.
that. I'm gonna take that.
Feel
Seasons
it.
of year.
All
Seasons of
yours.
year. Yeah.
Tell me how it was being a woman in those early days and really just looking to understand. I mean, were you, I'm assuming you were a minority as a woman in these offices, but tell us just a little bit about like what the demographics looked like and how you've overcome some of that adversity.
Yeah, so I got a twofer, right? So
Okay.
I'm in supply chain plus tech.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no secret what demographic dominates that industry, both
Exactly.
industries, right? And it's a systemic problem that a lot of the bigger tech companies and the bigger supply chain companies are now focusing on with
Mhm.
diversity and inclusion programs. But back then, there was none of that. And I actually remember one of my first bosses. He was an older white gentleman,
Mhm.
and he gave me a book, a few recommendations of books, and one of them was called "Talking to from 9 to 5 as a Woman," and
Oh,
I found that quite interesting.
huh. You have to look that up.
Why do I have to talk differently as a woman from 9 to 5 than a
Exactly.
man does?
Uh-huh. Why do I have to leave my
Why do I
Yep.
Yeah, why do I have to read a book about how I have to talk differently
That is
because I'm a
mind-blowing.
woman? It's
Yeah.
mind-blowing, right?
And we're talking in the last, what, 10, 12 years?
This was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This was 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, and, you just you feel like you can't fully be yourself,
Mhm.
and off the bat, you're judged by how you look, right? What you're wearing,
Yes.
how you say things, more than what you're actually saying.
Mhm.
And there's an immediate judgment that happens. And being taken seriously is not a given.
Mhm.
And there's a you really I feel like you have to earn it every single time.
Absolutely.
And there's a moment with every customer or company that I've been told uh, explicitly that I've proven myself, right? One
Which
of my
feels great, but are men ever told that they've proven themselves?
no,
Yeah.
not I wanna know, I'm not a man, so I can't assume,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
there's never I haven't seen that, where you get that stamp of approval that, yeah,
Exactly.
she does know what she's talking about. Yeah, I do trust her.
Exactly.
So it hasn't changed, honestly, um, as I progress through my career.
Mhm.
There's still that, aspect of earning and still having to
Yeah.
show it. So I think there's, this what you're doing, having women leaders talk and share their story
Mhm.
is, is phenomenal because the fact that we even have to do this
Exactly.
says something.
Yeah. But we need to, call for more troops to join us. And I
Mhm,
think the best way to do that is sharing your story. And something you just said made me think of a conversation I had last week where I was speaking to a group of supply chain women, and someone asked me how I've overcome imposter syndrome in my career. And it's a topic I can talk about, and I'm very vulnerable, just
mhm,
being open and honest about how I felt over the years. But what I realized as I responded to her was imposter syndrome, you're always chasing something. And so where you've proved yourself, it's like, okay, I've gotten to this point where I feel educated, knowledgeable, confident, having a conversation about this topic. Check, no more imposter syndrome. But there's something else waiting for you to feel like an imposter about. And it's just
mhm.
the next conversation, the next,
Yes,
opportunity, the next thing
yes,
going on in the market. And so it's really interesting because like I think everyone faces this in this career, but it's literally that climbing that ladder and constantly, being after that next thing, and you finish it and then it's like, oh, but now I feel like I'm an imposter in this area.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but it's probably also, I mean, for me, it's something that motivates me to keep learning, keep
Yeah.
trying, keep pushing myself. So I guess that's the silver lining.
I think it's also a mindset,
Very much.
right? So you can think about it as imposter syndrome, or you can think about it as, hey, there's something here that I still have to learn, and I'm going to go learn it, and I'm going to go do it, right?
Exactly.
You think a lot of people get tied up in worrying about the imposter syndrome itself and that feeling
Mhm.
versus the what do I need to do to feel confident in myself
Yeah.
enough to know that I know,
Yeah.
right? And that comes from within.
I love that.
Yeah.
Tell me what does success look like to you? Because you started our conversation that it is about, what you want to do as much as what you don't want to do,
Yeah.
but it doesn't sound like you've, strategically chased titles or the prestige of having that title. So how do you define success in your career as a whole?
Yeah, this is a really tough question. I saw an infographic the other day that said, it's like how we're taught to measure success, right? And it's a circle and 50% salary, 50% job title.
Mhm.
And below is like, here's a better way to think about success, right? And job title and salary were just maybe even less than a quarter of it.
Mhm.
And then there's time with family, there's flexibility,
Yeah.
right? There's balance. So for me, I think success is defined based on, again, like what season you're in of
Mhm.
your career,
Yeah,
right? So and being really aware and knowing that your season is constantly changing and checking in on that
exactly.
and what you want at that moment, right? So for
Mhm.
me right now, success is having great people around me, right? And I think to your point, I never chased titles. I never chased promotions to the point where I had a boss at one point. He's still a phenomenal mentor to me. He said, "Elise, you always leave money on the table. You never ask for anything, and that's a problem. Something you should work on."
I was expecting the opposite feedback, but that's an amazing
Yeah, and I'm like, "Well, yes, I never asked to manage a team. I never asked for a promotion. I never asked for
compliment.
more money, but I was still given it because
You earned
you had
it.
mentioned something earlier, right? You're just so focused on being really good at what you do
Mhm.
that naturally success you'll get to the thing, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you're really focused on a title, that's energy, that's headspace, that's not focused on the work that you're doing or the thing that you really, really want, right? Or being really, really good at what you do. So in a way, again, it's a bit dichotomous, right? If you're chasing the title, then that's less time that you're spending being really good at or trying to be the best at what you do.
Yes.
And if you're the best at what you do, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna get promoted. Like it
Exactly.
you will get promoted, I promise you.
It is really funny when you frame it that way. And we think of, as you talk about your mentor, we think of people in this industry that we respect. And going back to that, adage, it's not what people said, it's how they made you feel. I
Mhm.
don't know the titles of many people that inspire me every day. I know who they
Mhm.
are as a person. I know why they inspire me, but titles, I mean, especially in my world of recruiting, they're so relative.
Yeah.
And I mean, they truly they're necessary for categorization and classification,
Mhm.
but from a personal growth motivation standpoint, that is something we say to almost every candidate we talk to. Like, let's move away from the title you're looking for and really talk about the opportunity, the job, the career path that you're trying to develop. I think that's what it's more about.
Yeah.
And going back to success, you and I had a brief chat before we jumped on for the recording about your recent trip to Japan.
Yeah.
And I want to rehash that conversation for our watchers here, because to me, you have achieved success. And just to back up and frame it, Elise and I were chatting about how she just returned from a 17-day trip to Japan, somewhere she's always had on her bucket list, and how fulfilling it felt for you to literally check out. So talk about that for a minute, and kind of, how you did that as a leader and why you did that also as a leader.
Yeah, so I have a known problem, as I think many do, to constantly be checking my email, especially when you're in management. Your job is to be around to help people, to unblock people, to make decisions for people and for the company. And I've always been tied to my phone. Right,
Mhm.
and it took me a very long time to learn, especially, and I think the pandemic really forced it,
Yeah.
where I had to turn off notifications, and I couldn't keep getting distracted by pings, so I'm always on do not disturb, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I will go in and be conscious about when I'm going to check my email or when I'm going to check my Slack, and when I went to Japan, I it was actually my team, so the managers on my team who pushed me and held me accountable to not be on Slack,
Mhm.
to not respond to a single email. And my first day there, I did check my email.
Did you get
I
the
just
goal?
had to. It's an instinct, it's an instinct.
It
I
is.
did check my email, and the first thing I saw was, it was an escalation, and they had looped in, one of the managers on my team because they knew I
Mhm.
was gonna be out, and she had immediately responded and said, "Elise is out, I got this."
Mhm.
And just seeing that helped me practice what I preach.
Yeah.
I always tell people, "Disconnect when you're on vacation. Why are you responding? Why are you responding?" And, it's very different when you set the example, and actually practice what you preach. So I did it, and I truly did not, and this is the first time ever in my career doing this, did not check did not check Slack,
Mhm.
didn't talk to anybody about work. And when I came back, uh, I was talking to a gal, she's not on my team, and, she is heading out. She's on vacation now. She's on a
Mhm.
cruise, and she said that, she said, "Seeing you not be online inspired me to not buy the Wi-Fi package on the cruise ship."
I
It
love that.
it allowed me to know that, "Hey, if Elise can do it,
Mhm.
I can do it." Company's still standing, right?
Exactly, exactly. We're all back and alive, and
Yeah,
they figured it out without you. And I think
yeah.
it's a real just struggle, I think, as a leader, to constantly find that balance. We're here to serve, we're here to support, we're
Mhm,
here to advise, but then we also need to practice what we preach and lead by example. And I think for many years, I thought leading by example was I'm available no matter where I am in the world, no matter what my calendar says, I will be available for my team. And I've recently switched that with the help of my team too, really pushing me to lead by example, and walk the walk. If I'm telling everyone else to
mhm,
check out, then I need to check out. And
yeah,
that out of office message that they get may just be what they need to realize that it's okay to do that. And if
mhm,
their leadership team is doing that and encouraging it, you're not going to get in trouble for taking a vacation. We
right,
want you to come back rested and refreshed, and that's the
yeah,
only way to do it. But
yes,
it's a shift. It's a definite shift in society. And I do think it starts with the company
mm,
and the message, the philosophy, because I think what we're talking about is how it should be, but I'm not sure every company is quite there yet.
Yeah. And it all starts with leadership, to your point, right?
Sure.
Culture is driven top down. So you have to, yeah, not every company allows for that. So
No,
it is something where every person has an opportunity to be a leader, regardless of your title.
exactly.
Right? And take that opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Be a leader,
Because
even
you're
if you're
inspiring,
not to.
influencing
Yeah.
more than you probably know. So how in the past, let's just say like the past 10 years, as you've really, worked into leadership in this industry, how
Mhm.
have you seen some of these topics that I know are important to you and I rise to the surface? So whether it's mental wellness, self-care, having emotions, compassion, empathy in the workplace, have you felt a shift, or has it? Talk to me a little bit about what you've observed there.
I have certainly felt a shift
In a
uh,
good direction.
in a good direction. Yes. I have started to see um, a lot more because we're talking about it, a
Yeah.
lot more people being comfortable being fully themselves and wholly themselves, right? And I remember a colleague from maybe years ago, he said something to me once where he said, I'm my best self at work.
Hmm.
And I was like, huh.
Am I?
That's really interesting because you spend more time at work than you do anywhere else really,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so if you are turning on and turning off, right, you're someone different, you show up different
Mhm.
at work, you show up your best self. Don't don't you always wanna be your best self? Don't you just always wanna be you? And so that was a really interesting comment I heard from him, and I was fortunate to work at a company that had, top-down leadership that was fully themselves and
Mhm.
encouraged that,
Mhm.
and I saw myself kind of seeing them as the execs there, just wholly being themselves,
Yeah.
and then seeing so much more work get done because nobody was worrying about how they said it or what they said, and if you have good management or good managers and good people around you, they'll tell you if you have to trust that they'll tell you if you did
Right.
something wrong,
Right.
right? And that has been, for sure a big shift, the whole topic of culture and having a company culture that people want to come work at, right?
Mhm.
Because let's face it, work is called work for a reason. It's not called fun. Like, I'm not going to fun, right? But you
Exactly.
can make it that way.
It's so true. It's like we all work for the obvious reason. We need a
Yeah,
paycheck. That's what
yeah,
drives us. But are we going to do good work? Are we going to be excited by our work, motivated to show up every day, motivated to support our team every day? And that's what, the culture has to breed, is that connection and that common purpose.
yeah,
But it is, I really would, echo what you said, that it's come a long way, and it's almost like watching, a child's grow or a flower bloom, where it just happened. And I do credit the pandemic to really part of the evolution towards maybe a little more empathy and
mhm,
acceptance in the workplace. And whatever path we're on, I hope we stay on it, because I think
too,
leaders need to enforce it. Employees need to hear it. Male, female, doesn't matter what demographic you are. That's
yeah,
really, it's about that whole self showing up. And there's more to us behind our titles. There's a lot more.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
What are some of the challenges you feel like you have faced, and not only as a minority, being a woman, but because of
Yeah,
your ethnicity? I mean, have you ever felt targeted? Have you ever felt, insecure when you shouldn't be? Any comments that have ever been made to you? And I'm not digging for the negative, but really
yeah.
reality of what we face.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the laundry list goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could get into some really specific things that have been said about me, um, and being called out specifically, for being a woman or for being Asian. And the the thing is, I think when I was younger, right, I did let it get to me.
Mm-hmm.
It did really bother me a lot, and it didn't I think the reason I'm where I'm at today is I didn't give up,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't say, I just wanna quit. No one's ever gonna take me seriously, like, what am I doing here? I should just go do something that is, more fitting to kind of where I belong,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember
According to,
having a
right?
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation. I had totally I mean, I completely bombed this presentation. I was with a company. It's very old school. It's one of the first companies um, in America, and I
Mm-hmm.
was presenting to their leadership team, and I was very young at the time, and I completely bombed the presentation. I mean, couldn't have gone worse.
It's how you learn, right?
Oh, yeah, and I remember calling my dad, and I was sobbing, I was crying, and I was like, "You know, I'm gonna quit tomorrow, it's horrible," 'cause there was some feedback given to me,
Mm-hmm.
and, it wa you know, I don't really know how to say this politically correctly, but I was basically in a room with, a lot of almost everyone. Every
Mm-hmm.
single person did not look anything like me,
Mm-hmm.
was probably 4 times as old as I was, so I had 4x the amount of experience, um, complete opposite, right? And I felt like the reason I bombed that presentation was I was so in my own head.
Mm-hmm.
I was so in my own head about how I was being perceived, that I wasn't focused on the content, wasn't focused on the material that I was actually presenting. So, my dad told me, he's like, "No, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Show up next time and do it better.
Yeah. It's so true. It's like,
Just show Yep, and do it better."
yeah.
And I'll tell you, I mean, Troy, I still get emails and, it's the industry is the industry. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Mhm.
But I still get emails. I got one a couple weeks ago where I was straight off judged by, um, just an email I had sent, and
Mhm.
the response I got back was it was pretty wild. I couldn't believe what I was reading, honestly, but it specifically called out that I was some lady and that I, uh, apparently was a VP and just things that, uh, I was immediately judged
Yeah,
off an email.
and it's hard not to take that
Yeah,
personally. I mean, we're human.
yeah,
And so I think it just kind of makes you reflect back almost like, being in junior high again. Like,
yeah.
do I want to just fit in because it feels better and more comfortable, or
Mhm,
do I dare to be different and embrace that? And you kind of start to realize as you grow and you mature that everyone envies the different person. That's what's interesting. That's what's new and shiny.
yes.
It's really hard to get out of your own head because
Yeah,
belonging is comfortable, or feeling like I look around, this room and everyone looks and sounds like me. I fit right in. But I think we have to, especially as women, just embrace like I may say something different because I don't look and talk like you. And so
mhm.
listen up because there might be something
Yeah,
that you want to hear. So I love that. And thank you for sharing that so vulnerably. I think that
yeah,
I too have a lot of those stories, just, the way that we're spoken to, or I think a lot of it comes down to assumptions and perceptions and maybe some
mhm,
some ignorance, but um,
mhm.
we're here to show them, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's, a very competitive nature also, right?
Yeah,
So, I'm like, I will prove you wrong.
I
I'll
am I
prove
am
you
right
wrong,
there.
so
Exactly. It's like that is one thing that will drive me is
Exactly.
competition, even with yourself sometimes.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's turn it back and just talk about the industry
Yeah.
where you're at. I imagine you have a really interesting point of view on tech and just the
Mhm.
evolution of technology in, what once was a very old school industry. So at a high level, just let's share with our listeners, what are you seeing? Any predictions, anything that, we should all go read up on because it's coming our way?
I'll point out the obvious one, right? Open AI,
Mhm.
anecdotally known as ChatGPT
Sure.
4, ChatGPT 3. That's been the biggest change in AI in the past 100, no, 10 years, but the impact of it is more than anything the industry has ever seen. And so I will say, I worked for about 8 to 10 years in supply chain visibility specifically,
Mhm.
and it was definitely a nice to have back then,
Sure.
right? So change management was an uphill battle. It was, trying to sell our software. So it is totally a nice to have. And the pandemic, as awful as it was, triggered this criticality.
Mhm.
No longer became a nice to have. It was absolutely table stakes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think for me, and seeing right now, we don't know what the impact of this revolutionary, it truly is revolutionary.
Mhm.
We don't really know what's going to happen with it. And I was listening to this podcast. It's called All In. It's some VCs. They get together every Friday and they just chat about what's going on. And this topic has been on their agenda for the past probably 3 months every week,
Mhm.
right? And they make these predictions about what's going to happen. And something really funny that Chamath, he was an early investor in Facebook, had said was, "Oh, this is going to replace everybody. I mean, it's the only jobs that are safe are fitness instructors." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, if I had known that 10 years ago, I
Exactly.
would have stuck to my guns, right?" So I think, my predictions are predictions.
Mhm.
And it's what we do with it that really matters.
Mhm.
And a prediction is called a prediction, and a forecast is called a forecast because it changes.
Exactly.
And these things in technology are things we actually have control over.
Mhm.
And so I see, even with this, people and being in freight tech for so long and being customer facing for so long, um, having one of my KPIs always being adoption of the tool,
Sure.
right? It's people, I saw people become less and less afraid of technology replacing their jobs, right?
Yeah.
And seeing it for what it is, which
That's
is it's a
efficiencies.
tool. It's a
Mhm.
tool. A
Mhm.
tool for efficiency, and it's a tool for you to do your job better. And
That's
I see
exactly
the
how I think about it.
same thing with this revolutionary technology, right? Everyone's a little bit afraid.
Mhm.
What jobs are we going to replace, right? Like, let's not focus on that.
Yeah.
Let's actually focus on how can I use this? How can I know how I can adopt it, right?
Yep.
And instead of spending all this time being afraid of it, make it integral
Exactly.
so that you are in control of your replaceability,
It's
right?
so true.
It's
Yeah,
so
and that's really what technology should do for the most part is make
Mhm,
humans more efficient, more
mhm,
capable, more seamless processes so we actually have capacity to think and
mhm,
be creative with problem solving. Um,
mhm.
with AI and ChatGPT specifically,
Yes.
from your point of view, I mean, I was probably an early adopter, just being curious and
Yeah,
understanding
same
what
here.
playing with it any opportunity. But I still find that I bring it up in conversations and people are like, what is that? And so I had this conversation with a friend the other day who's a yoga instructor. She never looked at it, and she's like, why would I don't need that. And so I went on and I said, write me a 30-minute flow for a yoga class. And I showed it to her and she was like, oh my gosh. Like,
Yep.
so I still feel like there's a lag in, society with what it is and the power of it. And then obviously, the deeper you are in a tech profession, you're going to be more caught up and aware of the capabilities.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, oh yeah, ChatGPT, I've known that was coming for years? Or do you feel like it's something that, the tech side of our industry has really embraced recently as we've all started to hear the splash about it?
I personally am at a slight advantage because my partner studied AI for his master's at Stanford. So he was talking about this before it was even talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of like your friend. I was like, what is the big deal?
Why
He
would I
was so excited. I mean, I've not seen him this excited about something in so long. And he just was raving about it and just wouldn't stop talking about it. And he finally had to show me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he showed me, he's like, write a SQL script.
Yeah.
Right? That does X, Y, or Z. Write me this Excel formula. I was mind blown.
Mm-hmm.
Mind blown. And this was before anyone was really talking about it. So
Right.
I felt like I had a slight advantage there because I'm with someone who is deep in that industry. So to your point, there is going to be a heavy, heavy, heavy lag.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just last week, Sam Altman, the founder, the genius behind this, been working on this for the past 10 years, got ahead of it and went to the government and was like, we have to set up regulation around this and all of that. And I was, we were talking about, or we were talking about, I was listening to a podcast that was talking about it, that felt very much part of the conversation.
Exactly.
They were talking about how, even the senators, they didn't, the focus wasn't on what the technology is.
Mm-hmm.
It was about protecting their own interest.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
Very much so. And so I think, as humans, we have a natural tendency to like try and, it's our job, survival. Like that's instinct is to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So, there will definitely be a lag. I think it will be extremely disruptive in ways that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if this goes for everything, technology or not technology related, if it's something that you're hearing about and you don't know about it, it's your own personal drive to go figure out what it is and how it applies to you and how you want to leverage it, if you want to leverage it. And that's, I think that's just something that comes from within again, right? That self-motivation to figure something out, right?
So you don't feel like an imposter next time someone
exactly.
You try and fake it till you make it. You actually know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. So then you're not afraid of it anymore, right? That goes totally back to your imposter syndrome discussion, right? It's like right when you hear something that you don't understand, go, I would encourage everybody, go learn about it.
Yep.
Go learn what you can about it. And then you won't be an imposter.
I literally have on my notes on my phone, I have a note that is things to Google when I have time. And I literally,
I love that.
It's like so robust and people are like, you just sit and Google. And I'm like, but there are these ideas that like, I don't want to get distracted and go down a rabbit hole, but I am curious about that topic. And maybe by the time I go to Google it, I've already learned, but I keep that list with myself. So I'm always, things to Google. Like it's just.
I love that. I have a list of things to read, things to watch, things to buy, but I do not have a list of things to Google. I'm stealing that from you. I absolutely I love that.
I mean, full circle in our conversation today, if all else fails, you can always rely on ChatGPT to write your fitness programs and go back to being a fitness instructor if that's the best job out
Exactly.
there.
Exactly,
No,
exactly.
our industry does not want to lose you and everything you stand for. So,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Elise. I loved our conversation.
No.
I always love catching up with you. And I think you had a lot to say that our audience can learn from and be inspired from. So, really appreciate you joining our show
No.
and sharing your journey, your advice, and even some of your challenges that we can all learn from.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, I cannot tell you how exciting this type of program is. And again, I am honored to be a part of it. And, we do need to have these conversations early and often.
We
So thank
sure
you for
do.
having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge. We all appreciate it.